Hello boys and girls, Ant here, and today I thought I'd take a look at an RPG game. Now, ever since I started doing this series of videos, I always wanted to tackle an RPG, and quite a while back I was chatting to Jimmy Happer of Import Gaming for the Win on one of his videos about one of the Suikoden games. Fantastic video, give it a watch. And he encouraged me to try doing an RPG, and it's always been something that's been pretty daunting to me, just the idea of covering such a, massive game. So I thought what I'd do is I'd tackle an RPG that isn't massively story heavy, something that's a lot more mechanics heavy, which, is what I talk about quite often on the channel. And so I decided to cover Disgaea, Hour of Darkness. But then a snag hit. I found out that January the 30th, 2018 is the 15th anniversary of the Disgaea series, so I guess I'm covering, all of them? Oh, heck. Now, I'm mostly going to be covering Disgaea 5. That's going to take up the largest portion of the video. That'll be towards the end, after I've talked about the other games. But I thought it'd be good just to do this, just to talk about all 5 games in the series, touch a little bit on the spin-offs, and, see how we go. It's only going to be like a 40-minute long video. I'll put time codes below so you can skip to the different parts. Thanks, guys, and sit back. It's going to be a long video. The first entry in the Disgaea series was released in Japan on January 30th, 2003 with the title Makai Senki Disgaea, which translates roughly as Neverworld Battle Chronicle Disgaea. The game continued the Nipponichi isometric strategy RPG style used with the PS1 game Rhapsody, A Musical Adventure, and PS2's La Pucelle Tactics, but took on the tone and setting of a whole other direction. Disgaea is set in a Neverworld, a sort of hell-like world where demons live and rule. In this version of hell, sinful humans are turned into prinnies and have their souls placed inside a penguin-shaped leather sack body to work off their sins until they are worthy of reincarnation. Due to the demonic setting, the morals of the world have been flipped. Being uncaring and sociopathic are common traits for demons, and words like love have no place in the Neverworld. Most demons would claim to have never even heard of the word. The plot follows Lahal, the son of the late ruler of the Neverworld, King Khrushchevskoy, who had died during a 2-year slumber Lahal had been enjoying. After being awoken by his vassal Etna and informed of how there is currently a big free-for-all going to determine the Neverworld's new ruler, referred to in the series as Overlords, Lahal and Etna set out to beat down anyone who attempts to stop their rise to power. Things are complicated by a lack of funds, a reoccurring roadblock of a villain with delusions of grandeur called Vyers, who's promptly renamed mid-boss by the team, and a curious angel called Flon. Flon is the heart of the game's story. She's been sent to kill King Khrushchevskoy, but has clearly arrived a bit late for that. Also, not the most heavenly of missions, is it? She soon meets Lahal and is shocked to discover that he shows no sign of grief for his departed father, and decides to make it her mission to break through his hard exterior and allow him to experience grief and love. Two things Lahal insists he knows nothing about because they don't exist for demons. The game's story is presented like episodes of an anime, a trend that would continue for the entire series. Each episode is its own self-contained story, and each one ends with a comical next time on style buffer. The series as a whole doesn't take itself too seriously at any moment and often breaks the fourth wall and embraces the whole silly anime style approach it's presented with. If you have a very low tolerance of wacky Japanese anime, the series may not be for you. That said, as we'll discuss later, the series really doesn't care if you follow the story at all. You can skip every cutscene and rarely lose out on any information relevant to the battles, especially helpful when playing through on your New Game Plus run. Gameplay in the Disgaea series could best be described as light strategy RPG. You place units on an isometric grid-based map and take turns making moves against your enemies. You can place up to 10 units in a round and set up multiple moves in a row to execute in sequence. You choose end turn when you've made all your moves, and any that are still queued up to be executed will happen then. One aspect that's somewhat unique to the series is that you can cancel any placement of a character you make. As long as they haven't executed an attack themselves, you can send them back to where they were. This allows you to place a character in a position to be healed, and then cancel the position you had them in so they can move somewhere else to execute an attack of their own. You could also place them next to teammates as they do their attack on the chance they'll perform a team attack, a special group attack where any teammates beside the attacking characters have a chance to join in on the beatings. In later games, multiple special moves can tie together, and in Disgaea 5 there's a few unique moves that two characters execute, and even then you can still cancel the movement of one character that didn't initiate the team up attack, freeing them up to do more attacks of their own. The game can be super tricky if you want it to be, which I'll go into later in the video, but it rarely gets to the tactical precision of say Fire Emblem or even Final Fantasy Tactics. Think of it as the arcade game of the strategic RPG world. Flashy and simple, but at the same time deceptively complex. The first game in the Disgaea series introduced us to a few mechanics that would become series hallmarks and even appear in other Nipponichi RPGs. Firstly, there's the item world. This is a series of randomly generated levels set inside individual items. Completing floors of the dungeon increase the quality of the item, boosting its stats and extending its usefulness. This also provides an essentially endless way to keep playing the game, as literally every item from swords to slippers can have dungeons inside them. The amount of floors is determined by rarity, so the more rare an item, the more potential it has. Don't jump in too recklessly though, enemies scale in difficulty the deeper you go in, and there's only two ways out. Either you use a cleverly named item, I'll give you a second, or you choose an exit after getting past the boss located at the end of every 10th floor. You can always re-enter from where you left off though, so don't worry if you don't make it all the way through in one go. Along with the item worlds, there's the Dark Assembly, where you can motion the politicians of the Netherworld to give you more money, increase or decrease enemy difficulty, and even open up new worlds to venture into for extra challenges and rewards. You bribe the senators with items you've amassed, and you'll have so many items. If they still don't pass the bill, you can always beat them up or just use cold hard cash, just like in real life. Other mechanics I'll go into greater detail in the Disgaea 5 portion of the video, such as geostones, but for now I'll just go into transmigration. Transmigration opened up the potential for endless levelling by reverting your character back to level 1, but with boosted stats so they become even more powerful. The amount your stats are boosted depends on how much mana you invest. Mana is a currency accrued from killing enemies, which is used for creating characters or requesting builds from the Dark Assembly. The more you have, the better stat inheritance you can request for your transmigration, and the stronger your characters will end up being. Transmigration, along with boosting items in the item world, is one of the cool ways of making your characters into killing machines. The US and PAL region versions of the game were released in August 2003 and March 2004 respectively, and featured the addition of a song called Invasion from Within by Tsunami Bomb on one stage. That's the song I played during the intro sequence. This was removed from later ports though, which is a bit of a shame. It was quite cool that it was even in the game to begin with. I remember myself and Mellow Gaming buddy Paul being super excited to get our hands on the series, mostly because of how ridiculous the level in an item world sounded. He got his copy from Amazon a few days before me, and I've never forgiven him for that. Really not fair. I finished it first though. In your face, Paul. The game was later ported to PSP as Afternoon of Darkness and added a new story mode called Etna Mode, where Etna accidentally kills Lahal in the game's opening. A new multiplayer mode was part of this port as well. It also included some added characters from Disgaea 2 and Makai Kingdoms and a new widescreen display. There was also a version released for the Nintendo DS which loses a lot of the voice acting and language options, but gained touchscreen controls and some new multiplayer features. Another port of the game was released on PC in 2016 and it's, well, not great. Whilst the full game is there, including Etna Mode and all the extras from the PSP and DS versions, it's a really shoddy port. The game has some really misguided graphical options which just result in a really smeared look, which you can thankfully turn off. There's updated textures which is nice, but look a little weird against the low resolution sprites. I captured all footage from the PC version because of how the original PS2 version is one of those weird games that outputs at 240p, and as a result cannot be captured by my recording device. Also, I wanted to keep the video in widescreen the whole way through. That said, it's not ideal. There's screen tearing, which doesn't come out too much in the recording luckily. Also, the game straight up doesn't work in full screen anymore. By anymore I mean that it used to. A patch was released for the game that causes it to crash when booted in full screen, and it's never been fixed. As is often the case with these poor ports these days, a user has come to the rescue in the form of a guy named Chaldean, who created the Pretty Prinny mod which fixes the full screen issue among other features. Originally this mod added proper Xbox pad buttons to the game display. The game used to have numbers for the buttons, which isn't super useful, but Nipponichi actually did patch that in at some point. I also get the occasional temporary freezes when attacking enemies now, which manifest in these recordings as skipped frames. If I was going to suggest a version of the original game to play, I'd say you can't go wrong with either the PlayStation 2 or PSP versions. The DS port is fine too, just lacks voiceovers and the graphics were a little simplified. The PS2 version has the least content, but as you'll discover as we move along, lack of content has never been an issue for this series of games. The PC version should be approached with caution. It really is quite a mess. Luckily, Disgaea's sequel has a much better PC port, so let's move on to that game and the two sequels that came after before we reach Disgaea 5.
Finally, the time has come for Prince Lahal to pay for all his evil deeds! Hey! Now Etna will fulfill the late prince's wish and succeed him to the throne! I'm not dead! So long, Prince! Your humble vassal Etna will put your money and power into good use!
You're one scary girl.
Next on Hyperdimensional Demon Gal Etna Episode 2, The Birth of Queen Etna! A new era of the Netherworld begins!
You're delusional.
Disgaea 2 was released in Japan on February 23, 2006, with ports reaching the US and UK in August and November respectively. I remember being pretty damn hyped for this, but also a little broke at the time, and I couldn't really afford to get a copy for myself. My buddy Paul did get it though, and he played it himself for a few days, brought it round mine and let me borrow it for a little while. And by a while I mean that copy I showed you at the start of the video is that same copy, and he's never taken it back. I've asked him, but he just kinda left it here. Paul, do you want your copy of Disgaea 2 back? Fun fact, that isn't actually the oldest game of his he's gone and left here right after getting it. Lesson to learn, don't leave things at my house. The first sequel in the series follows Adele, not that one, as he attempts to free his formerly human world from a curse placed upon it by an overlord named Zenon. This curse is turning everyone except him into a demon. Adele's mother attempts to summon Zenon to their hometown of Holt, assuming that Adele is the one able to defeat Zenon's curse, as he is the only one unaffected by it. Instead they summon Zenon's previously unheard of daughter Rosalind. She's not too impressed about the situation and begrudgingly agrees to guide Adele to Zenon, so he may return Rosalind to her father and then fight Zenon to break the curse. Adele is very big on making promises and keeping them, which is actually a theme that practically every Disgaea protagonist shares. Gradually it appears that Rosalind is plotting against Adele. which at first just seems like her demon nature, but is eventually revealed to be due to some severe family issues that she's too ashamed to admit. See, no one in the land has ever seen Overlord Zenon and lived. Rosalind is definitely his daughter. She carries the 4-leaf clover crest that proves her lineage, but she's never actually met her father. She believes he loves her as he showers her with gifts and gives her all she ever wanted, but she's also forbidden to leave her castle and isn't allowed any freedom at all. Of the first 4 Disgaea games, this is the one that has the most interesting plot for me. It really delves into matters of absent family members and what familial love is. Adel himself is losing his attachment to his family as they become more demon-like and less like who they were before. The story is still rather silly and fun though, so don't expect anything too heavy. Gameplay wise, Disgaea 2 is pretty much unchanged from the first. There's a few tweaks here and there, but as far as combat goes it's mostly identical. There is one new feature introduced to this chapter in the series and then never brought back. It's a twist on the item world formula called felonies. If a character commits a crime such as killing too many teammates, they receive a subpoena to appear at the Dark Court. You can enter this subpoena item just like you can any other item and fight your way to the Dark Court. There you'll be judged and you'll receive a stamp on your character's profile indicating that they committed a felony. Now this being a world of demons means that felonies are actually pretty good. You'll get 1 extra % of XP for each felony committed, up to 300%, and you'll be rewarded with new stages, money and items as you commit more crimes. There's a few other things felonies can affect, but I'll let you find them out. The PS2 version of the game was the first Nippon Ichi release to be printed on a DVD and runs at 480p, unlike the first game's awkward 240p. I did do a few Let's Plays of the PS2 version a few years back, but as you can see I've used the PC version for footage here because I don't have one of them fancy upscaling things that everyone seems to have these days. Disgaea 2 was also re-released on the PSP in 2009 with a few extra bonuses. An Axel mode where you play as the dark hero Axel, who's a perpetual buffoon and is the game's equivalent of mid-boss from the first Disgaea. Also added to the game were Mao and Rasberyl and Mr. Shampoo from Disgaea 3, which we'll get onto in a moment. Of all the versions, I'd certainly suggest getting the PC port. It may not have redone textures, but it also doesn't have worthless graphical effects like the first games did. Also, it actually runs in full screen with no troubles and the screen doesn't tear up. It's a really solid port and I'd really like to see it get a PS4 release at some point. Next up is Disgaea 3 Absence of Justice, which was first released on the PlayStation 3 in Japan on January 31st, 2008, almost exactly 5 years after the release of the first game, and 10 years ago from now too. Happy 10th anniversary Disgaea 3. The game was released in the US in August 2008, but took nearly 6 months to find its way to the UK, which is why I imported the game. Thanks for the region 3 abilities on the PlayStation 3, Sony. Disgaea 3 has often been seen as a bit of a contentious entry in the series. As you can probably already see, it looks a lot like the PlayStation 2 game. Sprites are a slightly higher resolution than the ones in Disgaea 2, but it's really a negligible increase. To add to that, textures of the locations are again only a little better. There's some flashier effects going on in combat, but the game really feels like, upon first impression, the series had really stood still. To add to that, for me personally, I really didn't jive with the game's story until quite some way into the game, where it really started to ramp up. This entry in the series is set at a demon academy netherworld literally called Evil Academy. Subtlety isn't a demonic trait, it seems. The story follows Mao, the son of the Netherworld's overlord, who is so good at being a demon student that he hasn't attended a single day of school. You see, demons are graded on how unruly they can be, and there's nothing more demonic a student can do than play truant from school every single day. Mao spends his time reading heroic comic books and attempting to figure out the secret to defeating his father and taking his place as the Netherworld's overlord. Mao comes to the conclusion that in order to do this, he must become a hero. and so sets out to do so by finding a real hero and stealing his title. That poor unfortunate hero is Almaz, a somewhat naive but genuinely good-hearted fighter who's on a quest to save a princess. Mal steals Almaz's title and forces him to work alongside him, which doesn't go to plan. They confront Mal's father, or at least his hand. His father is very big and Mal really isn't sure where the rest of him is, and this battle goes well until it doesn't and they must make a retreat. Mal realises he needs to make some changes to his plan if he's going to win, and so his journey begins. During the early stages we're also introduced to an eventual ally, the delinquent student Rasbel, and her two goody two-shoe friends Asuka Cranekick and Kyoka Needleworker. Rasbel is the ultimate bad student at the Evil Academy. She's never late for class, always does her homework, and regularly does work for good causes. She is truly the most delinquent demon the Netherworld has ever seen, and she's not too happy that Mao is attempting to become a true hero, as he would put her status in jeopardy. Disgaea 3 introduced two new mechanics to the series, Magichange and Evilities. Magichange is pretty simple, it allows any monster character to become a weapon for another character. Their stats are adjusted as a result and XP is shared. Magichanging lasts only a couple of turns, so it's worth using wisely. When those turns are over, you're free to bring another character out of the base panel to replace the lost monster. Evilities are a bonus modification you can make to the characters that tweak how they work, doing things like increasing the amount of damage a character does based on how many enemy units are on the map, or reducing damage taken if an enemy level is higher. Every character has 3 abilities they earn as they level, and there are many abilities you can buy using mana. Only 2 can be equipped at a time though, but 2 is enough to make a difference to your character's build. Disgaea 3 was ported to the PlayStation Vita in late 2011 in Japan, and arrived in the West in 2012. The Vita version includes all the PS3 game's DLC and even added the characters Fuka and Desco from Disgaea 4. The Vita version is the one to get here for sure. The smaller screen takes the edge off the outdated graphics, and Disgaea has always been a great game for portable play. The last game in this segment is Disgaea 4, A Promise Unforgotten, and it is a superb game. It really was the game people had hoped Disgaea would have been on PlayStation 3. It was released in Japan on February 24, 2011 and made its way to the US in September, followed by PAL regions in November of that year. What you'll notice right away is that the sprites have been upgraded to nice high-res art assets that have a distinct feel of being ripped straight from an anime, which really helped give Disgaea the look it clearly wanted all along. There is an option to switch them back to lower resolution form, but I don't know why you would. There's also a neat little animations in cutscenes where previously static characters have a little more movement to them. This was the only entry in the series that does this, and it is a real nice touch. The story follows a former vampire tyrant of the Netherworld called Valvatores, who has been massively demoted to being a Prinny instructor in the Netherworld of Hades. Hades is essentially where sinful humans go to be turned into Prinnies and begin their rehabilitation. It's Valvatores' job to train these Prinnies in all they need to know in order to start repaying their debt, including a number 1 Prinny rule of always saying the word dude at the end of every sentence. Dude. Valvatores is stuck in his job after falling from grace due to a promise he made to a woman hundreds of years ago. He promised to never drink a drop of blood again until he could instill fear in her. She died before he could do this, and as such he has been locked to a fate of never being at his full power, as he can never fulfill his promise. Luckily, he's discovered the nutritious benefits of sardines, just in time to plot a rebellion against the rulers of Hades, who plan to bring extermination to the Prinnies to cut back on their overcrowding. The story in this game is one of the most enjoyable in the series and really goes all over the place in terms of twists and turns. Valvatores meets and recruits a team of fighters including an angel Artina, a human named Fuka who never got a proper Prinny body due to lack of resources, and Desco, a genetically engineered demon. The post-game, which is really where any Disgaea game begins, features a neat bonus story that allows you to recruit a few characters from past games. There's also a lot of DLC for the game, such as extra characters, special parts for a pirate ship you can bring into the item worlds or have appear in other players' item worlds, and new map parts for the game's map creation feature. A new feature was added to the game in the form of demon views, where two monster type characters can combine together to form a larger monster, kind of like Station from Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey.
Station.
This combined monster does more damage and has increased stats, as you'd expect. The giant-sized creature even bumps characters out of the way, which can be handy for setting up future attacks. The fusions can be taken further, but we'll be here all day if we went into every detail of these Disgaea games. You're probably noticing by now that they really do have a lot of modes and features going on. I've not even touched on the territory gaining element of this game, or the way you can discipline captured demons. Oh yeah, you can capture demons in this one. There really is a lot going on, and this isn't even the biggest Disgaea game. That's coming up soon. Disgaea 4 was neck and neck for being my favourite in the series for quite some time. It was between this and the first game for me. What held it back was an issue the PS3 sequels both had. They overly complicated matters with slightly abstract new features such as the third game's classroom and the fourth game's territory gaining. They all involve going to different maps and moving characters about physically, and it was all a bit long-winded at times. Disgaea 4 got a PlayStation Vita port in 2014, and it features a number of gameplay improvements that had been featured in the spin-off sequel to the first Disgaea game, Disgaea D2, such as tweaks to move cancelling and a cheat shop. It also features all the DLC from the PS3 version and a new scenario for Artina and Valvatores. I'd say it's the version to get for sure, but the PS3 version is still great. As I just mentioned, there was one other PS3 Disgaea game that was a direct sequel to the first entry in the series, Disgaea D2 A Brighter Darkness. I've never owned a copy of this game, much to my shame as a fan of the series. Quite a few of the features I'll be discussing in the Disgaea 5 segment came from this game originally. It was released pretty late in the PS3 life cycle, in March 2013 in Japan and September 2013 in the UK, the first time a game in the series came out here before the US, where its release was a month later in October. It came at a time when I had moved on from that generation of consoles to PC gaming for a while, so it ended up flying right by me. Hopefully I'll get to it someday. I definitely will if it ever receives a PS4 or PC port. If you do fancy playing the PS3 Disgaea games, there is a compilation disc available featuring all three that isn't too expensive, sometimes cheaper than the individual games. There are a few spin-off Disgaea games such as Prinny Can I Be the Hero on PSP, which had its own sequel on the same format. There's also Makai Kingdom's Chronicle of the Sacred Tome on PS2, which is considered part of the Disgaea series, what with it being set in one of the many Netherworlds. There's been mobile games and even a visual novel called Disgaea Infinite. I think I've focused on the older games enough though. Let's move on. It's time to talk about Disgaea 5, the game I feel is the best in the series.
I am Seraphina of Nether Institute, Evil Academy's inaugural class. With my beauty and 1.8 million IQ, I charm all men. But only one person can be destined for me. Now, to fight for my love, a massive battle royale is about to begin.
The one who will super win Sarah's love is me, the strongest of the top dogs of this academy.
The one who deserves Seraphina's love is me, the chairman of the Discipline Club.
Wrong.
Seraphina's love is all mine. The new transfer student and her childhood friend, Kilia.
Next time on Netherworld Academy Disgaea, Episode 3, Battle Roy Love. My beauty is a sin.
You're gonna ignore me? I need love too!
Disgaea 5 was released in Japan on March 25, 2015 and made its way to the US and Europe late that year in October. When the series made the move to the PlayStation 3, fan reactions were mixed. Disgaea 3 was fine, but looked seriously outdated. Nipponichi clearly did not want to make that same mistake a second time. Building on the advancements made with Disgaea 4 and D2, they made sure this entry looked like a current gen game. Nice clean textures and high-res sprite art made sure that the anime style carried over. This entry was originally going to be on PS3, but the developers decided that they wanted to take advantage of the PS4's power to bump up just how many characters can be seen on screen at once. The story follows the mysterious Kilia and the seductive Seraphina, as they form a rebellion army to defeat an evil demon named Void Dark. This villain is waging war on all the Netherworlds, destroying everyone in his path in the quest to gain unlimited power. Many characters in the game have their past tied in with Void Dark and, as such, all have their reasons for wanting to stop him. Kilia's past is haunted by events that happened between himself and Void Dark, who he intends to enact revenge upon. Christo, who's definitely not an angel, has been accused of being a spy for Void Dark and is determined to clear his name by enlisting the help of the most powerful demons he can find. Red Magnus's Netherworld was attacked by Void Dark, something he blames himself for, possibly due to how he slept through the attack. Every character has their own need to fight Void and to join the rebel army, but gradually, as the story develops, a real camaraderie builds between the team and they begin showing some very undemon-like habits, such as selfless actions, apologising, and even familial love. Ugh, gross. This story gradually became my favourite in the series, and it kind of blindsided me with how emotional it gets later on. For example, Kilia is constantly struggling with an internal conflict, which is represented by an other version of himself that wishes to be released, urging Kilia to do so in order for him to truly become the tyrant he used to be. This plays out as a sort of guilt complex for past failings, but more so as a pretty solid depiction of the sort of self-loathing someone suffering from depression or survivor's guilt may have. This other Kilia is a voice in his head telling him he'll never be good enough, so he may as well just become what his head is telling him he is. Kilia struggled for years to put those thoughts behind him that had, in a previous time, made him a feared tyrant overlord. All the characters have similar arcs, some of which seem silly at first, but grow to be pretty damn strong plotlines. One team member called Asalia turns into a crazed monster when she hasn't eaten any curry recently, thanks to a curse put on her by a villain named Margarita. The curse was placed on her after Margarita killed Usalia's parents as a sort of ironic extra level of punishment, as Usalia hates curry with a passion. Luckily for Asalia, Kilia is quite the curry chef. You'll even get to make your own curries later in the game. Also, Asalia learns to love curry, so that's good. The confrontation she gets into later though, man, they're harsh. Again, not spoiling, but Margarita killed Usalia's parents, and also has the power to turn anyone she kills into zombie soldiers. So, yeah, you can guess where that may head. The story is the longest in the entire series at 16 chapters long, plus some post-game story too. No character gets left out of having a real character arc, and despite how silly it can be, I mean there's a whole episode focused on everyone getting to taste Kilia's amazing curry, it really does stick the landing in its final third. That said, if you aren't interested in the story, the game always allows you to skip it. It's totally understandable if you find the whole hyper anime style a bit too much. really helps make this game work isn't just the story, but that Nipponichi focused on making every system clearer and less obtuse. They made a more inviting Disgaea game. For example, instead of arranging your sub-teams in a classroom or on a map system, they just did the simple thing of making a squads menu. Here you can chuck characters in a team that could provide stat buffs or some new functions to the hub world, and that's all it takes. No walking around in a 3D space to place characters into groups, just plop them down in the menu and get out quickly. Makes switching up the team super fast compared to earlier entries in the series. This philosophy extends everywhere. For example, there's a mode where you can send your characters off to have battles on other netherworlds where they'll gain items, capture prisoners and gain XP all on their own. All you have to do is go into a menu, pick the world and send them off. It's a neat system that allows you to have a few weaker characters level up a bit while you're off in the item world building up the strength via hard candies. Sometimes they'll uncover a boss in that world and you can go beat them up personally with your main characters. Creating characters has been given a tweak by allowing you to use cash to make them and boost their starting stats instead of using mana your characters have built up from killing enemies. This can be helpful as you'll often have an abundance of cash but maybe not enough mana to make a good fire mage. New character classes are unlocked as you go by completing small quests and building up the rank of your other character classes through general use. There's also the usual higher tiers of character types unlocked as you go too. If you are finding yourself low on cash or mana, the game provides you with a cheat menu. Like, not a hidden cheat menu. It's just a regular place you can go in your hub to cheat. Here you can lower the percentage of, say, mana received to up how much XP or weapon skill you gain. The game actively encourages you to do this too. Remember, you're playing as demons, cheating is just part of life for you. You can also tweak the difficulty of enemies, enable healing between stages that won't cost you any cash, and make it so you can't cancel moves, among many other features. This is a great feature for setting your own difficulty. Don't want to grind ever? Just up the XP. Enemies not tough enough? Boost their stats. This sort of freedom is everywhere in Disgaea 5 and it's a lot less fussy to implement than similar functions in previous games in the series. A feature of the series I've not spoken about yet is Geostones. This has existed in the series since the first game, but as I didn't want to bog down the first half of this video with too much in the way of gameplay mechanics talk, I thought I'd discuss it here. When you enter many levels, you'll see these glowing squares on the floor called geopanels. You'll also see these little gems called geostones. The stones contain various powers, some are buffs for your team, and some will make your life a lot harder. You might get an XP buff, or maybe you can't use ranged attacks or enemies could level up every turn. If a stone is on, say, a red geopanel, every red panel will have that effect. If across the map multiple different stones are on the same red panel, all of their effects will be active on all red panels. You can imagine how this could either help or hinder you greatly. To deal with these you simply have to destroy the gem. Easy enough, I guess. Now if for example a blue gem on a red square is destroyed, it'll turn all the red squares blue. Pretty simple. But what if the already existing blue squares had a geostone of their own on them? Well, now you've just increased how many panels that stone is affecting. What if there was 2 or more stones on those red panels? Well, now you've started a geochain, bruv. This is kind of your aim. Move the geostones around in a manner so that when one is destroyed you begin a chain reaction where the changing of the panels, which cause damage to anyone standing on them as they change, will destroy other geostones, causing them to start new colour change chain, and so on and so on. What you really want to do is clear them all though. You do this by destroying a null stone, a transparent geostone, when all the other panels on the stage have been turned one colour. This will clear all the panels from the map and damage every enemy on the screen. This all feeds into the bonus gauge, which, man, is like a whole other system on top of all these systems. These games go deep. One thing I'm glad of in Disgaea 5 is that they removed geocubes from the game. I hated these things. Essentially they function the same as geostones, but could be stacked upon each other, but also couldn't be picked up if they were touching another cube. You destroyed them by hitting them still, but you could cause a chain by throwing a cube of one colour into cubes of the same colour. It was a pain in the arse wasting attacks to clear out connecting cubes, so you could throw one to get rid of some of the cubes causing you problems. The real challenge they provided though wasn't in their stat buffs, but just in how they made the stages not fun to play. All they really ended up doing was either blocking your view when randomly stacked all over the place, or by how much they'd tank the frame rate and add lag to the gameplay when there was too many of them grouped together. Geopanels are much better and easier to understand, and again I'm pointing out stuff that made Disgaea 5 a lot more inviting to play for newcomers. See, it's a great game. Obviously the item world is back with some new tweaks. These fishes will appear sometime, and having a character holding them at the end of a stage grants the item bonus levels. These weird rabbit things need smacking about to boost stats. The bottle guys need breaking open to receive bonus items. The randomisation of the maps seems a lot more well designed than the previous games too. It's pretty rare you'll be stuck on a map with too many high peaks blocking your view, or enemies in spots you can't really reach. There's a bunch of cool random chance encounters too, such as this bad boy I got to meet for the first time during a live stream a few months back. Oh shit. Pearl, what's going on? Oh my, you've encountered someone that you shouldn't have. This is Proto Dark Death, a troublesome enemy that Mr. Egg has accidentally dropped. Proto Dark Death is a very strong enemy, so I recommend trying to escape. If you're brave enough to fight, I won't stop you. If you can defeat him, a strong power will dwell within the item. He's got 42,000 strength. By comparison, he's got 66,000. Should we see what this does? This is going to do nothing to him. Oh, he survived. Oh, he's got revenge on. And she attacked him back for attacking him. Ugh. She's not going to kill him, that's okay. Oh my god, Evil Man Death Wave. Never seen this before. I'm gonna just go in there. Yeah. The whole game is just more refined and easy to play than ever before. I've known people to pick up this as their first entry in the series and find it a lot less daunting than they were expecting it to be. That's always been a bit of an issue for the series. Once you hear there's theoretically infinite levels, that all items contain dungeons, that every aspect of a character can be leveled up individually, it all starts to sound a bit much. But here's something about Disgaea, and particularly this 5th entry, that's important for newcomers to learn. None of it matters. Seriously, I'm telling you that in this great game I'm praising that none of the extra features matter. Don't want to go into the item world? Don't. You'll get powerful weapons as you go. Want a power level? Well, there's options to help that. Not interested in building character classes up? Don't worry so much. The games have never been super strategically heavy despite how much the numbers and stats would make it look. You'll get a few challenging stages, but generally you can just brute force your way through if you feel like it. Bump up that XP gain in the cheat shop, do a couple of older stages again and go back to where you're stuck. The game is only as deep as you want it to be. You can literally play through the story and only touch the item world or deal with other elements such as the Dark Assembly a handful of times. You can leave getting really deep into the stats for the post-game stuff, or maybe even play through 2 or 3. And man, I still haven't spoken about the character world, which is like a weird board game for gaining small character buffs. There's a Netherworld editor, which I've never messed around with myself because, as mentioned, none of it matters. You play the game your way, I'll play it mine, and that's great. This is one of the most freeform RPGs out there. There's players who speed level their way through the games, get the most powerful items in the game, boost them to their max, reincarnate their characters back to level 1 and start all over. And there's players like me who play through the story, do a bit of the item world, retry older stages with harder enemies, spend time trying to pass bills I have no chance of winning. I am the most unfocused Disgaea player around, and I love it. Choice permeates these games, from stories that focus on characters making decisions that break from what you'd expect, such as demons choosing to care about someone other than themselves, to gameplay that gives you choice in the form of a ludicrously stat-heavy experience full of character building minutiae that is perfectly happy to let you choose what you'll do with it all. You'll never hit a roadblock because you failed to boost the strength of your weapons. You'll never be at a point where there's nothing else you can do other than, say, a boss battle you can't pass. There's so many distractions from the main questline, that grinding isn't much of a problem as you can do it while actively completing some other task. You can choose what you care about and focus on that, or not. If I had one criticism I feel this game deserves, it's how they made a lot of the characters who would have been on disc bonuses DLC this time round. That said, the game is always going on sale on PSN, as is its season pass. There's also some free DLC that nets you a bunch of characters without jumping through any loopholes, some of which are pretty great. A port for the Nintendo Switch was released in March 2017 in Japan and May in the US and PAL regions. That includes all the DLC from the start. To unlock the characters, you have to complete a few stages of a short story, but they're scaled to your character's level, unlike the bonus stages in previous games, and so can be unlocked whenever you like. The game looks near identical to the PS4 version. In fact, I've been using footage from it during this video mixed in with the PS4 footage, and I doubt anyone noticed. There's a demo available on the Switch store and it's pretty beefy, comprising of the entire first chapter. Well worth giving a try. I mentioned earlier that Disgaea is a great handheld game, so having a version you can play on both your TV and in a portable mode is pretty rad. I could honestly keep going on about Disgaea 5 for way longer than I have, but this script is currently sitting at, oh man, nearly 8,000 words. Not enough to impress a sane prince, but that is over double the length of my last review. Oh my god, I didn't even mention the series' amazing music by Tenpei Sato that defines the feel of Disgaea games and straddles multiple genres. Although you have been listening to it in the background this whole time, so I think you'll know it's pretty good by now. I'll leave some playing after this bit. Oh, something else to add. As this episode was being made, Nippon Ichi announced that a remake of Disgaea 1 was coming in the summer of 2018. On top of that, they slyly teased Disgaea 6. Now if they release some trailer footage while I'm working on this, I'll show it here. But anyway, this brings us to the end of our journey. I would like to thank you for watching, especially if you made it this far. The Disgaea series has been a favourite of mine since the beginning, and hopefully you'll consider giving the series a look, especially Disgaea 5, which I genuinely do consider to be a masterpiece.